Welcome to Utah Stories. Today on the show, why should you want to print a magazine? So this is a lesson we just learned recently, why we should continue to print a magazine. How about learning that rampant censorship still exists in tech? And I'll share that with you. Also, we'll share with you Moab, Utah affordable housing crisis. It is actually a real crisis. And we talked to a couple who could not get into their housing in Moab despite having excellent credit, great jobs, a lot of money, everything one would expect from professionals who would be excellent tenants, but they couldn't get into housing in Moab. And we interviewed them. It's an excellent interview. You're really insightful. You're not going to want to miss that. And finally, we are debuting our latest short documentary on homelessness in Utah, in Salt Lake City. We've been working on it for the past 2 weeks. It features the NBA All-Star Weekend in downtown Salt Lake City that was 2 weeks ago. And we look at where the homeless were moved, and we examine the question, why don't the homeless work? We found from a survey that 80% of the homeless want to work, so why don't they? The answer might surprise you. It really did surprise me. So first, our brand new hot off the press March issue Utah Stories magazine. Check that out. Isn't that a beautiful cover? The amazing Chris Bodley did another excellent job. It features 3 of my favorite things: beer, women, and Moab. It's our big Moab issue, and you're not going to want to miss it because it's definitely going to be a keepsake, a family heirloom, and a treasure. So if you want to subscribe to Utah Stories magazine, we will actually send this issue to you. We don't usually do that, but we're going to do that this month if you subscribe this week. That's while supplies last. So you're going to want to get on and subscribe to the magazine right away if you want to get that, because we can only offer 100 of those. So go subscribe to the magazine. And I'm going to tell you why we print a magazine. So printing on paper kills trees. Printing on paper requires tons of energy. It requires ink that's not great for the environment. It's wasteful, expensive, it's antiquated, it's legacy media, it's passé, so why do it? I was reminded last week why we print on paper. YouTube struck Utah Stories channel with a community violation strike. This violation was not for any new content we had recently published, but it was for a podcast we produced nearly 2 years ago based on a KUTV news story about a Utah woman who had allegedly died from the COVID vaccine. We debunked the claim that she had died from the COVID vaccine. We debunked it, and then we used facts directly from the CDC's website. We read those facts. Still, YouTube removed our content, and now they're threatening to remove our channel if we violate their community standards again. How did we violate their standards? They cannot tell us. What it likely was YouTube's bot went through and they found our content. They didn't like it, and they removed it. We're obviously not a huge YouTube channel, so we didn't have any way to counter what they were doing. But why does this really matter? So YouTube, which is owned by Google, controls a huge chunk of the video that is streamed online. YouTube is incredible. Don't get me wrong. I love YouTube. I'm a huge fan of the platform. I wouldn't use it if I weren't. We reach a much wider audience than we ever could without them. So YouTube, Google, as well as Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, I believe, in my opinion, they're getting a lot of their marching orders, I know at least Twitter for sure is, from the FBI. We know that the FBI was working directly with Twitter and their top executives about who should be censored, who should be blocked. And we know that Biden's so-called Russian disinformation campaign laptop story was in fact true. That story was blocked by big tech, and we know that received scant coverage in the media because most of the media has been compliant about their no-fly zones. They get their marching orders from the big tech companies. They get their marching orders from the political parties they represent. We live in a hyper-partisan world. You're in one camp or the other. Utah Stories is in neither camp. We're actually truly independent. We look for the truth. This is a scary trend and direction we are heading. I really believe it is. The Enlightenment era, if you go way back when the country was founded, it began thanks to the invention and mass distribution of information. This era began in 1685, and it served to spread the concepts of free speech and inform a greater percentage of people who became literate. Since this era began, these newly literate people went from largely being subjects, bending the knee to the king and a ruling authority, to being citizens, having a say in their own governance, spreading democracy. The notion of popular sovereignty was born. Certainly, the rise of newspaper created problems with misinformation and disinformation, but especially in the United States, the government never silenced newspapers, nor did they prevent the spread of information. Only a few authoritarians even attempted to do that. Civil discourse and debate allowed citizens to arrive at their own conclusions, and the best ideas rose to the top, the worst ideas were tossed into the trash bin of history. Now we are witnessing centralized powers telling us what we are allowed to talk about, what we cannot say, and we must reject this trend because we must be able to report and talk about facts, but also examine various sides of issues which involve people's opinions. The COVID vaccines, for better or for worse, deserve such discussion and debate. The decision by our CDC under Anthony Fauci to determine that anyone disagreeing with his rules was anti-science violated the First Amendment rights. Government shutdowns violated our civil liberties, and silencing of conscientious objectors to government policies violates our First Amendment. We print Utah Stories each month to keep our liberties and free speech alive and well here in Utah. You notice we're not shying away from controversy and criticism of our government leaders, no matter what their political affiliation. We equally insult and tell off the Republicans as we do the Democrats here in Utah. We believe in debate, promoting critical thinking, promoting democracy by sharing the truth. So support the printing of this magazine that isn't afraid to hold the truth to power by subscribing to the magazine. That's the best way you can help us out. A big thanks to the hundreds of you who have already done that. All right, so let's get into our first story. So to say that Moab, Utah is this little, it used to be this little teeny tiny town. It's still only 1,200 residents in the main city. To call it a boom town in that it's suffering from growing pains, that doesn't accurately capture the town's dynamics. It's absolutely crazy there. Moab, which was the main receiver of traffic due to the Mighty Five campaign, if you remember that from a few years ago, is seriously suffering from systemic underhousing and underdevelopment. And there's a lot of people who feel like they belong there, but they have zero sense of ownership because they can't buy any property. So not only river guides and restaurant employees, but also teachers are having an incredible difficult time finding affordable housing. Many are resorting to living out of their vehicles, and the process of traditional gentrification is a well-known story to tourist towns such as Park City, Aspen, Vail, and now even Sugar House. That's basically a big problem where you price out the working class and the poor, and the wealthy elites are setting the rules for the hot real estate market. Like, oh, my values went up in my house by $100,000 over the last year. And they kind of like that, so they buy up more land, they buy up more houses, they buy rental properties, and the corporate elites come in and build more and more hotels. So we conducted an interview with a young couple, Chloe and Kiefer Wilson, who found jobs in Moab. Kiefer is a professional welder, and Chloe was hired to teach welding at the new Utah State University campus in Moab. Little did they know that it was nearly impossible to find housing in Moab. They were asked to provide a $10,000 deposit on a condo they found, and so they had to resort to camping in their RV. They lost their RV spot. They had to move. But they offer some really great insight into this problem. So now I want to play for you my interview with Chloe and Kiefer. Start that now. Alleviate the problems, especially for younger people, working class people, and anything that you'd like to say to like the mayor or the planning director, or the people in charge that would really help your situation? I
Yeah,
think that's
good
about it.
question. Okay, so I graduated from USU with my welding degree in 2019 and then have worked in the industry ever since. And then one of my previous instructors reached out to me and told me about this welding instructor position that was opening in Moab for a new program. And I couldn't turn down the job. Like, I knew that I would regret it if I turned down the job. And it seemed like a really wonderful place to live and a really good job. And they mentioned throughout the whole interview process that housing is a big issue in Moab, which I wasn't aware of really beforehand.
Sorry, where
And
were you
for
living before?
Salt Lake, we both lived in Salt Lake before.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And I grew up in Utah County, so yeah, this is a whole different housing situation than any of us have like ever dealt with before. And so yeah, they emphasized throughout my whole interview process, like start securing housing now. Housing is a huge issue in Moab. You need to make sure you have a place to live if you accept this position. And we did a little research beforehand, and the research that we were seeing, like the things that we were seeing were some apartments, some homes, everything was super overpriced. He had a dog coming, like he has a Great Dane, and a lot of the places that rented locally didn't accept pets. And so cost was a big barrier. The no pet thing was a barrier. And there's very little local availability for apartments anyway. We actually, there was a house that we were contacted about that was available to rent locally, and it was 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms. The rent was going to be 2,200 a month, which was a little steep already, but I was willing to take it. But the guy wanted $10,000 to move in to a
Wow.
rental.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that was first and last months, and then deposit,
yeah. And
and
he was
then
not upfront about that.
and then
Like we
a
went,
pet fee.
yeah, we went through a whole song and dance about what are the expectations, what does the house look like, logistics. That was probably an hour-long conversation, and he didn't mention during that conversation that he expected a $10,000 deposit to move into the rental. And he was surprised when I said that wasn't going to work for us and that I thought that was not an appropriate deposit.
Did you try to work out terms like maybe getting 6 months to pay the whole 10,000, or was he
He
pretty
was
out?
pretty,
Yeah, we did give him some options and said like this is what we can do, this is what we can afford, um, and he wouldn't budge.
he told me that I should go to a family member and ask them to loan me money for the deposit.
Yeah,
That's
that's
what he suggested.
And is it super competitive where as you have like 10 people applying for one 2 bedroom apartment?
yes.
Really?
I'm not sure. He would probably know more about that than I would.
Yeah, it's very competitive, and the landlords down here kind of have an unwritten, like an unspoken code between them. So like let's say, this person fills this part of the application to rent here, they'll reach out to the other landlord and just let them know, so that if that person goes to that landlord and says, "Hey, I see a property that you own," and they'll just immediately red flag them and turn them down and say, "No,
Wow.
we've
Really?
we've heard from so and so, this landlord, that you filled this part of the credit application or the rental application, or you didn't have the money, and so we're not even going to bother with your time." So not only is it super competitive because everybody is trying to get out of the trailers, they're trying to get out of people's, sleeping on couches, in their vans, in their trucks, and they're trying to get into reasonable living, but it's very competitive, and then you have that whole monopoly with the landlords, and then three, it's extremely expensive.
And also a lot of the workers down here are service industry workers, and so they're not making a lot of money. And so just to afford basic housing down here, they're having to work at least 2 jobs.
Yeah, no one
Yeah.
down here just in the service industry, and you could say the same for Salt Lake too, like in the service industry, like they're, but like here
It's worse here.
with it being
It's worse here.
a tourist town and so much money being brought to the town, nobody here gets paid a livable wage
In the service
in
industry.
the
No.
service
And with
industry.
Salt Lake, it was nice because there's a lot of like adjoining cities, and if you want, you can pick a place that's like that has like a 20-30 minute commute, but it's cheaper to live. But there's not a lot of options down here in Moab like that. There's a few adjoining cities, but there's not as many options as Salt Lake.
So you have in Moab, I know the TRT tax, the transit room tax, is going toward an economic development plan to help make Moab more year-round and make it more hospitable for service sector people and employees like yourselves and teachers and support staff. What would you say is the missing piece of this puzzle right now? What's really lacking that's preventing affordable housing in your eyes?
From my perspective, and I guess the general consensus of my peers too, is just that there's a lack of affordable housing, period, end of story. Like, the missing piece is that everybody here that owns property sees that nightly rental money. Like, we kind of just got booted out of our campground because this week, and we had 4 days to find another one, because they see that overnight money, and all, like, just how less stressful it is to have somebody come rent for 2 days and then leave and they clean up after them, versus a long-term resident that might have, you know, other issues or problems, and they see that quick turnover money.
Especially in the summer. They know that they can make way more money renting nightly to tourists than they could for just locals that pay a monthly rent. And then also the mayor, let's talk about the mayor too, because you correct me, because he has more information on this than I do, but the mayor seems to have vested interest in, you talk about it, you know what I'm talking about.
She seems to have a vested interest in the nightly rentals and supporting her constituents that own these nightly rentals and that own these businesses that do the tour guiding and stuff like that. And so, like, there's a couple river rafting guide companies in town. And so, for example, I'm not going to say which one, but like, she helped find housing for them, for their employees that'll travel here from out of state and work during the busy season and do river guiding. She helped find housing for them because the owner gave her a break on a property that she bought. And then, like, 3 or 4 months ago, there was some funding
Is that based on somebody telling you that?
Okay. That part there we have to take off the record because it gets into the sticky area of hearsay, and we value our journalistic integrity. We don't report hearsay. But the point is that it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue because Utah State University expanded a campus down there to support more people who could be working professionals who are outside of the tourism economy. But the tourism economy is essentially eclipsing the attempts to create a year-round economy, because as you heard from Kiefer, in the summertime, everybody wants to turn their property into nightly rentals, and everybody wants to cash in. And then you have the hotel money there just infusing more and more and more capital, and they are now providing housing for the workers. And what you have in Aspen and Vail and Park City is a working class who cannot afford to live anywhere near the town. And that would be very sad if that's what happens to Moab, because people want to live there. It should be a working class town. It always was. So it's a very difficult challenge they have on their hands. Let's hope they solve it. We're going to be doing a mini doc on this that will debut in about a month. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to our digital newsletter, at least, if you want to stay posted on that. All right, next story is the majority of Utah's unsheltered homeless, it turns out, want to work. We did a poll. We surveyed people, and we found out that 70% are willing to work right now. Like, they just want to get back to work. 10% say they could work part-time, and only 20% tell us they can't work at all. And most of the 20% who say they can't work at all say that's because they were told they can't work. So why aren't we putting our homeless population to work? It's a simple question. Restaurant owners are struggling to keep hours because of their desperate need for employees. Some have even closed their doors for lack of finding prep cooks and dishwashers. They just said, we're giving up. I've seen it with several restaurants in downtown. Entry-level positions that were once very easy to staff, they can't find staffing for. So why can't these two parties just hook up with each other? The simple answer: government programs that currently prevent or punish the homeless from working. Quote, if I were to take a job, there's a very good chance that when I return to my tent, all my belongings will be gone, said Cody in a recent interview with him. This is due to Salt Lake City's current abatement policy, which we've pointed out as a euphemism for harass and move around the homeless constantly. The Salt Lake City Police Department, working with the Salt Lake County Health Department, is spending the majority of homeless money discarding homeless belongings, including their essential survival gear to survive the cold. They put it into dump trucks that relocate their gear to the Salt Lake County landfill. They can't use their gear once it's in the landfill, of course. So this gear is then replaced by organizations who get the generous donations from everyone in Utah who wants to help the homeless, folks like the Nomad Alliance, Volunteers of America, the Black Lives for Humanity. We had Ty Bellamy on the show a couple weeks ago. So the freezing cold weather, so these people don't die in the freezing cold weather. It's taking a toll on the homeless. I've heard up to 15 people have died so far this winter. So Salt Lake City Mayor Aaron Mendenhall maintains this policy. The abatement policy was first put into place as an emergency measure in 2016 as part of Operation Rio Grande. Salt Lake City residents who observe the situation believe that harassing and moving out the homeless, tossing out everything they own, such as I mentioned, Ty Bellamy, who operates Black Lives for Humanity, is inhumane. Yet Mayor Mendenhall contends, quote, there is no issue I spend more time on, she says, than thinking about Salt Lake City's unsheltered homeless. She said this on a recent Instagram video. Salt Lake City's unsheltered tell Utah Stories that they would prefer Mayor Mendenhall to stop thinking about the problem and actually come down and talk to them and attempt to survive under the conditions that she places them in. Quote, I challenge her to come down here and try to spend one single day, said Johnny. She told us it's really hard, especially when the police are making it so difficult to keep our blankets and tents. Mendenhall contends that the finger pointing needs to stop, that homelessness is a regional issue, and all cities need to step up. That's true. All cities need to step up. While the SLCPD has taken a more relaxed approach since the freezing deaths of the 15 people I've told you about, it's still extremely difficult for anyone on the streets to get back on their feet. So restaurant owners such as Anthony Bonamini, who owns 4 downtown Salt Lake City restaurants, including Christopher's Prime Steakhouse, tells Utah Stories that they would like to start hiring homeless people, putting them to work, starting a jobs program. First, get him clean, get him sheltered, and then get him into his kitchens for training. He would be willing to put up his own money to help start this. So it turns out a program similar to this existed in 2016, according to Surya Bhattacharya, owner of the Himalayan Kitchen. This program existed under former police chief Chris Burbank. Bhattacharya said that it was successful for about half the people he trained in his kitchens. They were all formerly homeless people. And he still keeps in touch with one of the people who so greatly appreciated getting the chance to work again that he texts him and keeps up to date on what he's doing. So, quote, I would like to work for sure. I would like to take day jobs. You're about to hear these quotes in a documentary we're about to premiere just after this show, so stay tuned. But the problem is I can't put all my belongings into one duffel bag. Jared told us on the Nomad Alliance bus just prior to the NBA All-Star Weekend in Salt Lake City. So I want to show you now a film that we worked on for the last 2 weeks. We just went down, interviewed a whole bunch of homeless people. We actually got a lot of footage while we were at the NBA All-Star Weekend. We had fun, took my kids down there. But this clearly shows the voice. This clearly shows what the homeless people are saying. This provides a voice to the voiceless in downtown Salt Lake City. These are the things they don't want you to hear. The homeless have no reservations about providing the unvarnished truth. So with that, I want to debut this film. It's currently in YouTube. So I'm going to go out to our site right after this, and I'm going to go ahead and make it public and make it an instant premiere. So those of you who are watching live, look for that in the next 5 minutes. And thank you so much for watching today. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate all the awesome work that our authors and contributors did on this issue. I really think it's one of our best March issues ever. We even have women making waves, and we talk about all the incredible women, especially Mayor Mendenhall and her electric lawnmowers. Gail Miller did a private-public partnership to give, I believe, $150 million for the former ballpark neighborhood, which is the Salt Lake Bees, which were owned by the Miller Group, are exiting, sadly, Salt Lake City, mostly due to the violence in the ballpark area. But very cool ladies who are featured in this month's issue, as well as the Moab Affordable Camping and Housing Crisis feature story, which you can read in the pages there. And thanks to all of our new advertisers, the Apache Motel, the Sherry Griffith Expeditions, and all of Discover Moab, and all of these awesome new advertisers we signed on. There's been a ton of them. And it turns out there still is a great market for providing the voice of local Utah in print. So be sure to go pick yours up. It's $3 a month, $36 for the entire year. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.